myself again. The gracious Spirit o'er this earth presides, and o'er the heart of man. Invisibly it comes to works of unreproved delight, and tendency benign, directing those who care not, know not, think not what they do. The tales that charm away the wakeful night in Araby, romances, legends penned for solace by dim light of monkish lamps, fictions for ladies of their love, devised by youthful squires, adventures endless, spun by the dismantled warrior in old age, out of the bowels of those very schemes in which his youth did first extravagate. These spread like day, and something in the shape of these will live till man shall be no more. Dumb yearnings, hidden appetites are ours, and they must have their food. Our childhood sits, our simple childhood, sits upon a throne that hath more power than all the elements. I guess not what this tells of being past, nor what it augurs of the life to come. But so it is, and in that dubious hour, that twilight when we first begin to see this dawning earth, to recognize, expect, and in the long probation that ensues, the time of trial, ere we learn to live in reconcilement with our stinted powers, to endure this state of meagre vassalage, unwilling to forego, confess, submit, uneasy and unsettled, yoke-fellows to custom, mettlesome, and not yet tamed and humbled down. Oh, then we feel, we know where we have friends. Ye dreamers, then, forgers of daring tales, we bless you then, impostors, drivellers, dotards, as the ape philosophy will call you. Then we feel with what and how great might ye are in league, who make our wish, our power, our thought a deed, an empire, a possession. Ye whom time and seasons serve, all faculties to whom earth crouches, the elements are potter's clay, space like a heaven filled up with northern lights, here, nowhere, there, and everywhere at once. Relinquishing this lofty eminence for ground, though humbler, not the less a tract of the same isthmus, which our spirits cross in progress from their native continent to earth and human life, the song might dwell on that delightful time of growing youth, when craving for the marvellous gives way to strengthening love for things that we have seen, when sober truth and steady sympathies, offered to notice by less daring pens, take firmer hold of us, and words themselves move us with conscious pleasure. I am sad at thought of raptures now forever flown. Almost to tears I sometimes could be sad to think of, to read over many a page, poems withal of name, which at that time did never fail to entrance me, and are now dead in my eyes, dead as a theatre, fresh emptied of spectators. Twice 5 years or less I might have seen, when first my mind with conscious pleasure opened to the charm of words in tuneful order, found them sweet for their own sakes, a passion and a power, and phrases pleased me chosen for delight, for pomp or love. Oft in the public roads yet unfrequented, while the morning light was yellowing the hilltops, I went abroad with a dear friend, and for the better part of 2 delightful hours we strolled along by the still borders of the misty lake, repeating favourite verses with one voice, or conning more, as happy as the birds that round us chaunted. Well might we be glad, lifted above the ground by airy fancies, more bright than madness or the dreams of wine. And though full oft the objects of our love were false, and in their splendour overwrought, yet was there surely then no vulgar power working within us, nothing less in truth than that most noble attribute of man, though yet untutored and inordinate, that wish for something loftier, more adorned, than is the common aspect, daily garb of human life. What wonder then if sounds of exultation echoed through the groves? For images and sentiments and words and everything encountered or pursued in that delicious world of poesy kept holiday, a never-ending show, with music, incense, festival, and flowers. Here must we pause. This only let me add, from heart experience and in humblest sense of modesty, that he, who in his youth, a daily wanderer among woods and fields, with living nature hath been intimate, not only in that raw unpractised time is stirred to ecstasy, as others are, by glittering verse, but further doth receive in measure only dealt out to himself, knowledge and increase of enduring joy from the great nature that exists in works of mighty poets. Visionary power attends the motions of the viewless winds, embodied in the mystery of words. There darkness makes abode, and all the host of shadowy things work endless changes. There, as in a mansion like their proper home, even forms and substances are circumfused by that transparent veil with light divine, and, through the turnings intricate of verse, present themselves as objects recognized, in flashes, and with glory not their own. End of section 5. Section 6 of the Prelude by William Wordsworth. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Book 6, Cambridge and the Alps.
I'll go for
The leaves were fading when to Esthwaite's banks, and the simplicities of cottage life I bade farewell. And one among the youth who, summoned by that season, reunite as scattered birds troop to the fowler's lure, went back to Granta's cloisters, not so prompt or eager, though as gay and undepressed in mind as when I thence had taken flight a few short months before. I turned my face without repining from the coves and heights, clothed in the sunshine of the withering fern. Quitted not both the mild magnificence of calmer lakes and louder streams, and you, frank-hearted maids of rocky Cumberland, you and your not unwelcome days of mirth, relinquished, and your nights of revelry, in my own unlovely cell sat down in lightsome mood. Such privilege has youth that cannot take long leave of pleasant thoughts. Bonds of indolent society relaxing in their hold, henceforth I lived more to myself. 2 winters may be passed without a separate notice. Many books were skimmed, devoured, or studiously perused, but with no settled plan. I was detached internally from academic cares, yet independent study seemed a course of hardy disobedience toward friends and kindred, proud rebellion and unkind. This spurious virtue rather let it bear a name it now deserves. This cowardice gave treacherous sanction to that over-love of freedom which encouraged me to turn from regulations even of my own, as from restraints and bonds. Yet who can tell, who knows what thus may have been gained, both then and at a later season, or preserved? What love of nature, what original strength of contemplation, what intuitive truths, the deepest and the best, what keen research, unbiased, unbewildered, and unawed. The poet's soul was with me at that time. Sweet meditations, the still overflow of present happiness, while future years lacked not anticipations, tender dreams, no few of which have since been realized. And some remain, hopes for my future life. 4 years and 30, told this very week, have I been now a sojourner on earth. My sorrow not unsmitten, yet for me life's morning radiance hath not left the hills, her dew is on the flowers. Those were the days which also first emboldened me to trust with firmness, hitherto but lightly touched by such a daring thought, that I might leave some monument behind me which pure hearts should reverence, the instinctive humbleness, contained even by the very name and thought of printed books and authorship, began to melt away, and further the dread awe of mighty names was softened down and seemed approachable, admitting fellowship of modest sympathy. Such aspect now, though not familiarly, my mind put on, content to observe, to achieve, and to enjoy. All winter long, whenever free to choose, did I by night frequent the college groves and tributary walks, the last and oft the only one who had been lingering there through hours of silence, till the porter's bell, the punctual follower on the stroke of 9, rang with its blunt, unceremonious voice, inexorable summons, lofty elms, inviting shades of opportune recess, bestowed composure on a neighbourhood unpeaceful in itself. A single tree with sinuous trunk, flowers exquisitely wreathed, grew there, an ash which winter for himself decked out with pride and with outlandish grace. Up from the ground and almost to the top, the trunk and every master branch were green with clustering ivy, and the lightsome twigs and outer spray profusely tipped with seeds that hung in yellow tassels, while the air stirred them, not voiceless. Often have I stood foot-bound up looking at this lovely tree beneath a frosty moon. The hemisphere of magic fictions, verse of mine perchance, may never tread. If scarcely Spencer's self could have more tranquil visions in his youth, or could more bright appearances create of human forms with superhuman powers, than I beheld loitering on calm clear nights, alone beneath this fairy work of earth. On the vague reading of a truant youth 'twere idle to descant. My inner judgment not seldom differed from my taste in books, as if it appertained to another mind. And yet the books which then I valued most are dearest to me now, for having scanned, not heedlessly, the laws and watched the forms of nature, in that knowledge I possessed a standard, often usefully applied, even when unconsciously, to things removed from a familiar sympathy. In fine, I was a better judge of thoughts than words, misled in estimating words, not only by common inexperience of youth, but by the trade in classic niceties, the dangerous craft of culling term and phrase from languages that want the living voice to carry meaning to the natural heart, to tell us what is passion, what is truth, what reason, what simplicity and sense. Yet may we not entirely overlook the pleasure gathered from the rudiments of geometric science. Though advanced in these inquiries, with regret I speak, no farther than the threshold, there I found both elevation and composed delight.
Hey, look!
With Indian awe
I'm
and
a
wonder,
planeswalker.
ignorance pleased with its own struggles, did I meditate on the relation those abstractions
I'm good
bear
on
to
that.
nature's
I
laws.
don't like this, dude.
By what process
I'm good.
led,
Thank you.
those immaterial agents bowed their
I'll go
heads
somewhere
duly
else,
to
thank you.
serve the mind of earthborn man.
Truly, I will go somewhere else. I don't like you at all. Get the fuck out. It's no, period. Get the fuck away from me.
From star to star, from kindred sphere to sphere, from system on to system without end. More frequently from the same source I drew a pleasure quiet and profound,
Creep,
a
shut
sense
up.
of permanent and universal sway, and paramount peace. There recognized a type for finite natures of the one supreme existence, the surpassing life which, to the boundaries of space and time, of melancholy space and doleful time, superior and incapable of change, nor touched by welterings of passion, is and hath the name of God. Transcendent peace and silence did await upon these thoughts that were a frequent comfort to my youth. 'Tis told by one whom stormy waters threw, with fellow sufferers by the shipwreck spared, upon a desert coast, that having brought to land a single volume, saved by chance, the treatise of geometry, he won't, although of food and clothing destitute, and beyond common wretchedness depressed, depart from company and take this book, then first a self-taught pupil in its truths, to spots remote, and draw his diagrams with a long staff upon the sand, and thus did oft beguile his sorrow, and almost forget his feeling. So, if like effect from the same cause produced, mid outward things so different may rightly be compared, so was it then with me, and so will be with poets ever. Mighty is the charm of those abstractions to a mind beset with images, and haunted by herself. Especially delightful unto me was that clear synthesis built up aloft, so gracefully, even then when it appeared not more than a mere plaything, or a toy to sense embodied, not the thing it is, in verity, an independent world, created out of pure intelligence. Such dispositions then were mine unearned by aught, I fear, of genuine desert, mine through heaven's grace and inborn aptitudes. And not to leave the story of that time imperfect, with these habits must be joined moods melancholy, fits of spleen, that loved a pensive sky, sad days, and piping winds, the twilight more than dawn, autumn than spring, the treasured and luxurious gloom of choice and inclination mainly, and the mere redundancy of youth's contentedness. The time thus spent add multitudes of hours pilfered away, by what the bard who sang of the enchanter indolence hath called good-natured lounging, and behold a map of my collegiate life, far less intense than duty called for, or without regard to duty, might have sprung up of itself by change of accidents, or even to speak without unkindness in another place. Yet why take refuge in that plea? The fault, this I repeat, was mine be the blame. In summer, making quest for works of art, or scenes renowned for beauty, I explored that streamlet whose blue current works its way between romantic Dovedale's spiry rocks. Pried into Yorkshire dales, or hidden tracts of my own native region, it was blessed between these sundry wanderings with a joy above all joys, that seemed another morn risen on mid-noon, blessed with the presence, friend, of that sole sister, O who hath been long dear to thee also, thy true friend and mine, now after separation desolate restored to me, such absence that she seemed a gift then first bestowed. The varied banks of Emont, hitherto unnamed in song, and that monastic castle mid tall trees, low standing by the margin of the stream, a mansion visited, as fame reports, by Sidney, where in sight of our Helvellyn, or stormy Crossfell, snatches he might pen of his Arcadia, by fraternal love inspired. That river and those mouldering towers have seen us side by side, when having clomb the darksome windings of a broken stair, and crept along a ridge of fractured wall, not without trembling, we in safety looked forth through some Gothic window's open space, and gathered with one mind a rich reward from the far-stretching landscape, by the light of morning beautified, or purple eve, or not less pleased lay on some turret's head, catching from tufts of grass and harebell flowers their faintest whisper to the passing breeze, given out while midday heat oppressed the plains. Another maid there was, who also shared a gladness o'er that season, then to me, by her exulting outside look of youth and placid under countenance, first endeared. That other spirit, Coleridge, who is now so near to us, that meek confiding heart, so reverenced by us both, o'er paths and fields in all that neighbourhood, through narrow lanes of eglantine, and through the shady woods, and o'er the border beacon, and the waste of naked pools and common crags that lay exposed on the bare veldt, was scattered love, the spirit of pleasure, and youth's golden gleam. O friend, we had not seen thee at that time, and yet a power is on me, and a strong confusion, and I seem to plant thee there. Far art thou wandered now in search of health and milder breezes, melancholy lot, but thou art with us in the past, the present, with us in the times to come. There is no grief, no sorrow, no despair, no languor, no dejection, no dismay. No absence scarcely can there be for those who love as we do. Speed thee well, divide with us thy pleasures, thy returning strength, receive it daily as a joy of ours. Share with us thy fresh spirits, whether gift of gales Etesian or of tender thoughts. I too have been a wanderer, but alas, how different the fate of different men! Though mutually unknown, yea, nursed and reared as if in several elements, we were framed to bend at last to the same discipline, predestined, if two beings ever were, to seek the same delights and have one health, one happiness. Throughout this narrative, else sooner ended, I have borne in mind for whom it registers the birth and marks the growth of gentleness, simplicity, and truth, and joyous loves that hallow innocent days of peace and self-command. Of rivers, fields, and groves I speak to thee, my friend, to thee, who yet a liveried schoolboy in the depths of the huge city, on the leaded roof of that wide edifice, thy school and home, wert used to lie and gaze upon the clouds moving in heaven, or of that pleasure tired, to shut thine eyes and by internal light see trees and meadows, and thy native stream, far distant, thus beheld from year to year of a long exile. Nor could I forget, in this late portion of my argument, that scarcely, as my term of pupilage ceased, had I left those academic bowers, when thou wert thither guided. From the heart of London and from cloisters there thou camest, and didst sit down in temperance and peace, a rigorous student. What a stormy course then followed! Oh, it is a pang that calls for utterance, to think what easy change of circumstances might to thee have spared a world of pain, ripened 1,000 hopes, forever withered. Through this retrospect of my collegiate life I still have had the after sojourn in the self-same place present before my eyes, have played with times and accidents as children do with cards, or as a man who, when his house is built, a frame locked up in wood and stone, doth still, as impotent fancy prompts, by his fireside, rebuild it to his liking. I have thought of thee, thy learning, gorgeous eloquence, and all the strength and plumage of thy youth, thy subtle speculations, toils abstruse among the schoolmen, and platonic forms of wild ideal pageantry, shaped out from things well matched or ill, and words for things, the self-created sustenance of a mind debarred from nature's living images, compelled to be a life unto herself, and unrelentingly possessed by thirst of greatness, love, and beauty. Not alone, surely not in singleness of heart, should I have seen the light of evening fade from smooth Cam's silent waters. Had we met, even at that early time, needs must I trust in the belief that my maturer age, my calmer habits, and more steady voice, would with an influence benign have soothed or chased away the airy wretchedness that battened on thy youth. But thou hast trod a march of glory, which doth put to shame these vain regrets. Health suffers in thee, else such grief for thee would be the weakest thought that ever harboured in the breast of man. A passing word erewhile did lightly touch on wanderings of my own, that now embraced with livelier hope a region wider far. When the third summer freedest from restraint, a youthful friend, he too a mountaineer, not slow to share my wishes, took his staff, and sallying forth, we journeyed side by side, bound to the distant Alps. A hardy slight did this unprecedented course imply of college studies and their set rewards. Nor had in truth the scheme been formed by me without uneasy forethought of the pain, the censures, and ill omening of those to whom my worldly interests were dear. Nature then was sovereign in my mind, and mighty forms, seizing a youthful fancy, had given a charter to irregular hopes. In any age of uneventful calm among the nations, surely would my heart have been possessed by similar desire. But Europe at that time was thrilled with joy, France standing on the top of golden hours, and human nature seeming born again. Lightly equipped, and but a few brief looks cast on the white cliffs of our native shore, from the receding vessel's deck, we chanced to land at Calais on the very eve of that great federal day, and there we saw, in a mean city and among a few, how bright a face is worn when joy of one is joy for tens of millions. Southward thence we held our way, direct through hamlets, towns, gaudy with relics of that festival, flowers left to wither on triumphal arcs and window garlands, on the public roads, and once 3 days successively through paths by which our toilsome journey was abridged. Among sequestered villages we walked, and found benevolence and blessedness spread like a fragrance everywhere, when spring hath left no corner of the land untouched. Where elms for many and many a league in files with their thin umbrage on the stately roads of that great kingdom rustled o'er our heads, forever near us as we paced along. How sweet at such a time, with such delight on every side, in prime of youthful strength, to feed a poet's tender melancholy and fond conceit of sadness, the sound of undulations varying as might please the wind which swayed them. Once and more than once, unhoused beneath the evening star, we saw dances of liberty, and in late hours of darkness, dances in the open air deftly prolonged, though grey-haired lookers-on might waste their breath in chiding. Under hills, the vine-clad hills and slopes of Burgundy, upon the bosom of the gentle Saône, we glided forward with the flowing stream, swift-grown, our words the wings on which we cut a winding passage with majestic ease between thy lofty rocks. Enchanting show those woods and farms and orchards did present, and single cottages and lurking towns, reach after reach, succession without end of deep and stately vales. A lonely pair of strangers, till day closed, we sailed along, clustered together with a merry crowd of those emancipated, a blithe host of travellers, chiefly delegates returning from the great spousals newly solemnized at their chief city, in the sight of heaven. Like bees they swarmed, gaudy and gay as bees. Some vapoured in the unruliness of joy, and with their swords flourished as if to fight the saucy air. In this proud company we landed, took with them our evening meal, guests welcome almost as the angels were to Abraham of old. The supper done, with flowing cups elate and happy thoughts, we rose at signal given, and formed a ring and hand in hand danced round and round the board. All hearts were open, every tongue was loud with amity and glee. We bore a name honoured in France, the name of Englishmen, and hospitably did they give us hail, as their forerunners in a glorious course, and round the board we danced again. With these blithe friends our voyage we renewed at early dawn. The monastery bells made a sweet jingling in our youthful ears, the rapid river flowing without noise, and each uprising or receding spire spake with a sense of peace, at intervals touching the heart amid the boisterous crew by whom we were encompassed. Taking leave of this glad throng, foot travellers side by side, measuring our steps in quiet, we pursued our journey, and ere twice the sun had set, beheld the convent of Chartreuse, and there rested within an awful solitude. Yes, for even then no other than a place of soul-affecting solitude appeared that far-famed region, though our eyes had seen, as toward the sacred mansion we advanced, arms flashing and a military glare of riotous men commissioned to expel the blameless inmates, and belike subvert that frame of social being which so long hath bodied forth the ghostliness of things in silence visible and perpetual calm.
Give me a minute.
Stay, you...
Take a 5-minute break. You want the historic. You want me to get out the council. Nope. We'll do standard only here. We just met. Excuse me? That's not bad. Hit or miss. The deck. You have a complaint about the deck? It seems pretty good, but it's pretty standard. Reconstructed. I hear the green as well. I want to see this tornado that just went through. Apparently there's a building across the road. I don't know if that was true or not. I like how I just jump in these books. I have no clue where I'm at. I have no clue what's going on. We're just hanging out. Answer any of your questions. Well, first of all, though, whoever made that didn't have permission to make it. But I mean, I'm not gonna get into that. I don't know why it's been doing that. The draw. You can stop doing that. My tooth.
Your sacrilegious hands. The voice was nature's, uttered from her alpine throne. I heard it then, and seem to hear it now. Your impious work forbear. Perish what may, let this one temple last, be this one spot of earth devoted to eternity. She ceased to speak, but while St. Bruno's pines waved their dark tops, not silent as they waved, and while below, along their several beds, murmured the sister streams of life and death. Thus by conflicting passions pressed, my heart responded. Honour to the patriot's zeal, glory and hope to newborn liberty. Hail to the mighty projects of the time. Discerning sword that justice wields, do thou go forth and prosper, and ye purging fires up to the loftiest towers of pride ascend, fanned by the breath of angry providence. But oh, if past and future be the wings on whose support harmoniously conjoined moves the great spirit of human knowledge, spare these courts of mystery, where a step advanced between the portals of the shadowy rocks leaves far behind life's treacherous vanities. For penitential tears and trembling hopes exchanged, to equalize in God's pure sight monarch and peasant, be the house redeemed with its unworldly votaries, for the sake of conquest over sense, hourly achieved through faith and meditative reason, resting upon the word of heaven imparted truth, calmly triumphant, and for humbler claim of that imaginative impulse sent from these majestic floods, yon shining cliffs, the untransmuted shapes of many worlds, cerulean ether's pure inhabitants, these forests unapproachable by death, that shall endure as long as man endures, to think, to hope, to worship, and to feel, to struggle, to be lost within himself in trepidation, from the blank abyss, to look with bodily eyes and be consoled. Not seldom since that moment have I wished that thou, O friend, the trouble or the calm hadst shared, when from profane regards apart, in sympathetic reverence we trod the floors of those dim cloisters, till that hour, from their foundation, strangers to the presence of unrestricted and unthinking man. Abroad, how cheeringly the sunshine lay upon the open lawns. Valombra's groves entering, we fed the soul with darkness. Thence issued, and with uplifted eyes beheld, in different quarters of the bending sky, the cross of Jesus stand erect, as if hands of angelic powers had fixed it there, memorial reverenced by 1,000 storms. Yet then, from the undiscriminating sweep and rage of one state whirlwind, insecure. 'Tis not my present purpose to retrace that variegated journey step by step. A march it was of military speed, and earth did change her images and forms before us, fast as clouds are changed in heaven. Day after day, up early and down late, from hill to vale we dropped, from vale to hill mounted, from province unto province swept, keen hunters in a chase of 14 weeks, eager as birds of prey, or as a ship upon the stretch when winds are blowing fair. Sweet coverts did we cross of pastoral life, enticing valleys, greeted them and left too soon, while yet the very flash and gleam of salutation were not passed away. Oh, sorrow for the youth who could have seen unchastened, unsubdued, unawed, unraised to patriarchal dignity of mind, and pure simplicity of wish and will, those sanctified abodes of peaceful man, pleased, though to hardship born, and compassed round with danger, varying as the seasons change, pleased with his daily task, or if not pleased, contented, from the moment that the dawn, surely not without attendant gleams of soul illumination, calls him forth to industry, by glistenings flung on rocks, whose evening shadows lead him to repose, well might a stranger look with bounding heart down on a green recess, the first I saw of those deep haunts, an aboriginal vale, quiet and lorded over and possessed by naked huts, wood-built and sown like tents, or Indian cabins over the fresh lawns and by the riverside. That very day from a bare ridge we also first beheld unveiled the summit of Mont Blanc, and grieved to have a soulless image on the eye that had usurped upon a living thought that never more could be. The wondrous vale of Chamonix stretched far below, and soon, with its dumb cataracts and streams of ice, a motionless array of mighty waves, 5 rivers broad and vast, made rich amends and reconciled us to realities. There small birds warble from the leafy trees, the eagle soars high in the element, there doth the reaper bind the yellow sheaf, the maiden spread the haycock in the sun, while winter like a well-tamed lion walks, descending from the mountain to make sport among the cottages by beds of flowers. Whate'er in this wide circuit we beheld or heard was fitted to our unripe state of intellect and heart. With such a book before our eyes, we could not choose but read lessons of genuine brotherhood, the plain and universal reason of mankind, the truths of young and old. Nor side by side, pacing, 2 social pilgrims, or alone, each with his humour, could we fail to abound in dreams and fictions, pensively composed, dejection taken up for pleasure's sake, and gilded sympathies, the willow wreath, and sober posies of funereal flowers, gathered among those solitudes sublime from formal gardens of the Lady Sorrow, did sweeten many a meditative hour. Yet still in me with those soft luxuries mixed something of stern mood, an underthirst of vigour seldom utterly allayed. And from that source how different a sadness would issue, let one incident make known. When from the Vallée we had turned, and clomb along the Simplon's steep and rugged road, following a band of muleteers, we reached a halting place, where all together took their noontide meal. Hastily rose our guide, leaving us at the board. A while we lingered, then paced the beaten downward way that led right to a rough stream's edge, and there broke off. The only track now visible was one that from the torrent's further brink held forth conspicuous invitation to ascend a lofty mountain. After brief delay, crossing the unbridged stream, that road we took, and clomb with eagerness, till anxious fears intruded, for we failed to overtake our comrades gone before. By fortunate chance, while every moment added doubt to doubt, a peasant met us, from whose mouth we learned that to the spot which had perplexed us first we must descend, and there should find the road which in the stony channel of the stream lay a few steps, and then along its banks, and that our future course, all plain to sight, was downwards with the current of that stream. Loath to believe what we so grieved to hear, for still we had hopes that pointed to the clouds, we questioned him again, and yet again, but every word that from the peasant's lips came in reply, translated by our feelings, ended in this, that we had crossed the Alps. Imagination, here the power so called through sad incompetence of human speech, that awful power rose from the mind's abyss, like an unfathered vapour that enwraps, at once, some lonely traveller. I was lost, halted without an effort to break through, but to my conscious soul I now can say, I recognize thy glory. In such strength of usurpation, when the light of sense goes out, but with a flash that has revealed the invisible world, doth greatness make abode, there harbours. Whether we be young or old, our destiny, our being's heart and home, is with infinitude, and only there. With hope it is, hope that can never die, effort and expectation and a desire, and something evermore about to be. Under such banners militant, the soul seeks for no trophies, struggles for no spoils that may attest her prowess, blessed in thoughts that are their own perfection and reward, strong in herself and in beatitude that hides her, like the mighty flood of Nile poured from his fount of Abyssinian clouds to fertilize the whole Egyptian plain. The melancholy slackening that ensued upon those tidings by the peasant given was soon dislodged. Downwards we hurried fast, and with the half-shaped road which we had missed, entered a narrow chasm. The brook and road were fellow travellers in this gloomy strait, and with them did we journey several hours at a slow pace. The immeasurable height of woods decaying, never to be decayed, the stationary blasts of waterfalls, and in the narrow rent at every turn winds thwarting winds, bewildered and forlorn, the torrents shooting from the clear blue sky, the rocks that muttered close upon our ears, black drizzling crags that spake by the wayside as if a voice were in them, the sick sight and giddy prospect of the raving stream, the unfettered clouds and region of the heavens, tumult and peace, the darkness and the light, were all like workings of one mind, the features of the same face, blossoms upon one tree, characters of the great apocalypse, the types and symbols of eternity, of first and last and midst and without end. That night our lodging was a house that stood alone within the valley, at a point where, tumbling from aloft, a torrent swelled the rapid stream whose margin we had trod. A dreary mansion, large beyond all need, with high and spacious rooms, deafened and stunned by noise of waters, making innocent sleep lie melancholy among weary bones. Uprisen betimes, our journey we renewed, led by the stream, ere noonday magnified into a lordly river, broad and deep, dimpling along in silent majesty, with mountains for its neighbours, and in view of distant mountains and their snowy tops, and thus proceeding to Locarno's lake, fit resting place for such a visitant. Locarno, spreading out in width like heaven, how dost thou cleave to the poetic heart, bask in the sunshine of the memory? And Como, thou, a treasure whom the earth keeps to herself, confined as in a depth of Abyssinian privacy. I spake of thee, thy chestnut woods, and garden plots of Indian corn tended by dark-eyed maids, thy lofty steeps and pathways roofed with vines, winding from house to house, from town to town, sole link that binds them to each other, walks, league after league, and cloistral avenues, where silence dwells if music be not there. While yet a youth undisciplined in verse, through fond ambition of that hour I strove to chant your praise, nor can approach you now, ungreeted by a more melodious song, where tones of nature, smoothed by learned art, may flow in lasting current. Like a breeze or sunbeam over your domain I passed, in motion without pause, but ye have left your beauty with me, a serene accord of forms and colours, passive yet endowed in their submissiveness with power as sweet and gracious, almost might I dare to say, as virtue is, or goodness. Sweet as love, or the remembrance of a generous deed, or mildest visitations of pure thought, when God, the giver of all joy, is thanked religiously in silent blessedness, sweet as this last herself, for such it is. With those delightful pathways we advanced, for 2 days' space, in presence of the lake, that stretching far among the Alps, assumed a character more stern. The second night, from sleep awakened and misled by sound of the church clock telling the hours with strokes, whose import then we had not learned, we rose by moonlight, doubting not that day was nigh, and that meanwhile by no uncertain path along the winding margin of the lake, led as before, we should behold the scene hushed in profound repose. We left the town of Gravedona with this hope, but soon were lost, bewildered among woods immense, and on a rock sat down to wait for day. An open place it was, and overlooked from high the sullen water far beneath, on which a dull red image of the moon lay bedded, changing oftentimes its form like an uneasy snake. From hour to hour we sat and sat, wondering as if the night had been ensnared by witchcraft. On the rock at last we stretched our weary limbs for sleep, but could not sleep, tormented by the stings of insects, which, with noise like that of noon, filled all the woods, the cry of unknown birds, the mountains more by blackness visible, and their own size, than any outward light, the breathless wilderness of clouds, the clock that told with unintelligible voice the widely parted hours, the noise of streams, and sometimes rustling motions nigh at hand, that did not leave us free from personal fear, and lastly the withdrawing moon that set before us while she still was high in heaven. These were our food, and such a summer's night followed that pair of golden days that shed on Como's lake, and all that round it lay, their fairest, softest, happiest influence. But here I must break off and bid farewell to days, each offering some new sight or fraught with some untried adventure, in a course prolonged till sprinklings of autumnal snow checked our unwearied steps. Let this alone be mentioned as a parting word, that not in hollow exultation dealing out hyperboles of praise comparative, not rich one moment to be poor for ever, not prostrate, overborne, as if the mind herself were nothing, a mere pensioner on outward forms, did we in presence stand of that magnificent region. On the front of this whole song is written that my heart must, in such temple, needs have offered up a different worship. Finally, whate'er I saw or heard or felt was but a stream that flowed into a kindred stream, a gale, confederate with the current of the soul, to speed my voyage, every sound or sight in its degree of power administered to grandeur or to tenderness, to the one directly, but to tender thoughts by means less often instantaneous in effect, led me to these by paths that in the main were more circuitous, but not less sure duly to reach the point marked out by heaven. O most beloved friend, a glorious time, a happy time that was. Triumphant looks were then the common language of all eyes. As if awaked from sleep, the nations hailed their great expectancy. The fife of war was then a spirit-stirring sound indeed, a blackbird's whistle in a budding grove.
No.
We left the Swiss exulting in the fate of their near neighbours, and when shortening fast our pilgrimage, nor distant far from home, we crossed the Brabant armies on the fret for battle in the cause of liberty. A stripling, scarcely of the household then of social life, I looked upon these things as from a distance, heard and saw and felt, was touched, but with no intimate concern. I seemed to move along them as a bird moves through the air, or as a fish pursues its sport, or feeds in its proper element. I wanted not that joy, I did not need such help. The ever-living universe, turn where I might, was opening out its glories, and the independent spirit of pure youth called forth, at every season, new delights spread round my steps like sunshine o'er green fields. End of section 6. Section 7 of the Prelude by William Wordsworth. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Book 7th. Residence in London. 6 changeful years have vanished since I first poured out, saluted by that quickening breeze which met me issuing from the city's walls, a glad preamble to this verse. I sang aloud with fervour irresistible of short-lived transport, like a torrent bursting from a black thundercloud down scaffold's side to rush and disappear. But soon broke forth, so willed the muse, a less impetuous stream, that flowed a while with unabating strength, then stopped for years, not audible again before last primrose time, beloved friend. The assurance which then cheered some heavy thoughts on thy departure to a foreign land has failed, too slowly moves the promised work. Through the whole summer have I been at rest, partly from voluntary holiday, and part through outward hindrance. But I heard after the hour of sunset yestereven, sitting within doors between light and dark, a choir of redbreasts gathered somewhere near my threshold, minstrels from the distant woods sent in on winter's service to announce, with preparation artful and benign, that the rough lord had left the surly north on his accustomed journey. The delight due to this timely notice unawares smote me, and listening I in whispers said, Ye heartsome choristers, ye and I will be associates, and unscared by blustering winds will chant together. Thereafter, as the shades of twilight deepened, going forth, I spied a glowworm underneath a dusky plume or canopy of yet unwithered fern, clear shining, like a hermit's taper seen through a thick forest. Silence touched me here no less than sound had done before, the child of summer lingering, shining by herself, the voiceless worm on the unfrequented hills, seemed sent on the same errand with the choir of winter that had warbled at my door, and the whole year breathed tenderness and love. The last night's genial feeling overflowed upon this morning, and my favourite grove, tossing in sunshine its dark boughs aloft, as if to make the strong wind visible, wakes in me agitations like its own, a spirit friendly to the poet's task, which we will now resume with lively hope, nor checked by aught of tamer argument that lies before us, needful to be told. Returned from that excursion, soon I bade farewell for ever to the sheltered seats of gowned students, quitted hall and bower, and every comfort of that privileged ground, well pleased to pitch a vagrant tent among the unfenced regions of society. Yet, undetermined to what course of life I should adhere, and seeming to possess a little space of intermediate time at full command, to London first I turned, in no disturbance of excessive hope, by personal ambition unenslaved, frugal as there was need, and though self-willed from dangerous passions free.
No.
3 years had flown since I had felt in heart and soul the shock of the huge town's first presence, and had paced her endless streets, a transient visitant. Now fixed amid that concourse of mankind where pleasure whirls about incessantly, and life and labour seem but one, I filled an idler's place, an idler well content to have a house, what matter for a home, that owned him, living cheerfully abroad with unchecked fancy ever on the stir, and all my young affections out of doors. There was a time when whatsoe'er is feigned of airy palaces, and gardens built by genii of romance, or hath in grave authentic history been set forth of Rome, or Cairo, Babylon, or Persepolis, or given upon report by pilgrim friars, of golden cities 10 months' journey deep among Tartarian wilds, fell short, far short, of what my fond simplicity believed and thought of London, held me by a chain less strong of wonder and obscure delight. Whether the bolt of childhood's fancy shot for me beyond its ordinary mark, 'twere vain to ask, but in our flock of boys was one, a cripple from his birth, whom chance summoned from school to London, fortunate and envied traveller. When the boy returned after short absence, curiously I scanned his mien and person, nor was free in sooth from disappointment, not to find some change in look and air from that new region brought, as if from fairyland. Much I questioned him, and every word he uttered on my ears fell flatter than a caged parrot's note, that answers unexpectedly awry, and mocks the prompter's listening. Marvellous things had vanity, quick spirit that appears almost as deeply seated and as strong in a child's heart as fear itself, conceived for my enjoyment. Would that I could now recall what then I pictured to myself, of mitred prelates, lords in ermine clad, the king and the king's palace, and not last nor least, heaven bless him, the renowned Lord Mayor. Dreams not unlike to those which once begat a change of purpose in young Whittington, when he, a friendless and a drooping boy, sat on a stone and heard the bells speak out articulate music. Above all, one thought baffled my understanding, how men lived even next-door neighbours, as we say, yet still strangers, not knowing each the other's name. O wondrous power of words, by simple faith licensed to take the meaning that we love! Vauxhall and Ranelagh, I then had heard of your green groves and wilderness of lamps dimming the stars, and fireworks magical, and gorgeous ladies under splendid domes, floating in dance, or warbling high in air the songs of spirits, nor had fancy fed with less delight upon that other class of marvels, broad-day wonders permanent, the river proudly bridged, the dizzy top and whispering gallery of St. Paul's, the tombs of Westminster, the giants of Guildhall, Bedlam and those carved maniacs at the gates, perpetually recumbent. Statues, man and the horse under him, in gilded pomp, adorning flowery gardens mid vast squares. The monument and that chamber of the tower where England's sovereigns sit in long array, their steeds bestriding, every mimic shape cased in the gleaming mail the monarch wore, whether for gorgeous tournament addressed, or life or death upon the battlefield. Those bold imaginations in due time had vanished, leaving others in their stead. And now I looked upon the living scene, familiarly perused it, oftentimes, in spite of strongest disappointment, pleased through courteous self-submission, as a tax paid to the object by prescriptive right. Rise up, thou monstrous anthill on the plain of a too busy world. Before me flow, thou endless stream of men and moving things. Thy everyday appearance as it strikes, with wonder heightened or sublimed by awe, on strangers of all ages, the quick dance of colours, lights and forms, the deafening din, the comers and the goers face to face, face after face, the string of dazzling wares, shop after shop, with symbols, blazoned names, and all the tradesmen's honours overhead. Here fronts of houses like a title page, with letters huge inscribed from top to toe, stationed above the door like guardian saints. There allegoric shapes, female or male, or physiognomies of real men, land warriors, kings or admirals of the sea, Boyle, Shakespeare, Newton, or the attractive head of some quack doctor, famous in his day. Meanwhile the roar continues, till at length, escaped as from an enemy, we turn abruptly into some sequestered nook, still as a sheltered place when winds blow loud. At leisure, thence, through tracts of thin resort, and sights and sounds that come at intervals, we take our way. A raree show is here, with children gathered round. Another street presents a company of dancing dogs, or dromedary with an antique pair of monkeys on his back, a minstrel band of Savoyards, or single and alone an English ballad singer. Private courts, gloomy as coffins, and unsightly lanes thrilled by some female vendor's scream, belike the very shrillest of all London cries. They then entangle our impatient steps, conducted through those labyrinths, unawares, to privileged regions and inviolate, where from their airy lodges studious lawyers look out on waters, walks and gardens green. Thence back into the throng, until we reach, following the tide that slackens by degrees, some half-frequented scene where wider streets bring straggling breezes of suburban air. Here files of ballads dangle from dead walls. Advertisements of giant size from high press forward in all colours on the sight. These, bold in conscious merit, lower down. That, fronted with a most imposing word, is, peradventure, one in masquerade. As on the broadening causeway we advance, behold, turned upwards, a face hard and strong in lineaments, and red with over-toil. Is one encountered here and everywhere, a travelling cripple by the trunk cut short and stumping on his arms. In sailor's garb another lies at length beside a range of well-formed characters, with chalk inscribed upon the smooth flat stones. The nurse is here, the bachelor that loves to sun himself, the military idler and the dame, that fieldward takes her walk with decent steps. Now homeward through the thickening hubbub, where see, among less distinguishable shapes, the begging scavenger with hat in hand, the Italian as he thrids his way with care, steadying, far seen, a frame of images upon his head, with basket at his breast, the Jew, the stately and slow-moving Turk, with freight of slippers piled beneath his arm. Enough, the mighty concourse I surveyed with no unthinking mind, well pleased to note among the crowd all specimens of man, through all the colours which the sun bestows, and every character of form and face. The Swede, the Russian, from the genial south the Frenchman and the Spaniard, from remote America the hunter Indian, Moors, Malays, Lascars, the Tartar, the Chinese, and Negro ladies in white muslin gowns. At leisure then I viewed from day to day the spectacles within doors, birds and beasts of every nature, and strange plants convened from every clime. And, next, those sights that ape the absolute presence of reality, expressing as in mirror sea and land, and what earth is, and what she has to show. I do not here allude to subtlest craft, by means refined attaining purest ends, but imitations fondly made in plain confession of man's weakness and his loves. Whether the painter, whose ambitious skill submits to nothing less than taking in a whole horizon's circuit, do with power like that of angels or commissioned spirits fix us upon some lofty pinnacle, or in a ship on waters with a world of life and life-like mockery beneath, above, behind, far stretching and before, or more mechanic artists represent, by scale exact, in model, wood or clay, from blended colours also borrowing help, some miniature of famous spots or things, St. Peter's Church, or more aspiring aim in microscopic vision, Rome herself, or haply some choice rural haunt, the falls of Tivoli, and high upon that steep, the Sibyl's mouldering temple, every tree, villa or cottage lurking among rocks throughout the landscape. Tuft, stone scratch minute, all that the traveller sees when he is there. Add to these exhibitions, mute and still, others of wider scope, where living men, music and shifting pantomimic scenes diversified the allurement. Need I fear to mention by its name, as in degree lowest of these and humblest in attempt, yet richly graced with honours of her own, half-rural Sadler's Wells? For at that time intolerant as is the way of youth unless itself be pleased, here more than once taking my seat, I saw, nor blush to add with ample recompense, giants and dwarfs, clowns, conjurers, posture-masters, harlequins, amid the uproar of the rabblement, perform their feats. Nor was it mean delight to watch crude nature work in untaught minds, to note the laws and progress of belief. For obstinate on this way, yet on that how willingly we travel, and how far. To have, for instance, brought upon the scene the champion, Jack the Giant Killer, lo, he dons his coat of darkness, on the stage walks and achieves his wonders from the eye of living mortal covert, as the moon hid in her vacant interlunar cave. Delusion bold, and how can it be wrought? The garb he wears is black as death, the word invisible flames forth upon his chest. Here too were forms and pressures of the time, rough, bold, as Grecian comedy displayed when art was young, dramas of living men, and recent things yet warm with life, a sea fight, shipwreck, or some domestic incident divulged by truth and magnified by fame, such as the daring brotherhood of late set forth, too serious theme for that light place. I mean, O distant friend, a story drawn from our own ground, the Maid of Buttermere, and how unfaithful to a virtuous wife, deserted and deceived, the spoiler came and wooed the artless daughter of the hills, and wedded her in cruel mockery of love and marriage bonds. These words to thee must needs bring back the moment when we first, ere the broad world rang with the maiden's name, beheld her serving at the cottage inn, both stricken as she entered or withdrew, with admiration of her modest mien and carriage marked by unexampled grace. We since that time not unfamiliarly have seen her discretion have observed, her just opinions, delicate reserve, her patience and humility of mind unspoiled by commendation and the excess of public notice, an offensive light to a meek spirit suffering inwardly. From this memorial tribute to my theme I was returning, when with sundry forms commingled, shapes which met me in the way that we must tread, thy image rose again, Maiden of Buttermere. She lives in peace upon the spot where she was born and reared. Without contamination doth she live in quietness, without anxiety. Beside the mountain chapel sleeps in earth her newborn infant, fearless as a lamb that, thither driven from some unsheltered place, rests underneath the little rock-like pile when storms are raging. Happy are they both, mother and child. These feelings in themselves trite do yet scarcely seem so when I think on those ingenuous moments of our youth, ere we have learnt by use to slight the crimes and sorrows of the world. Those simple days are now my theme, and foremost of the scenes which yet survive in memory appears one at whose centre sat a lovely boy, a sportive infant, who for 6 months' space, not more, had been of age to deal about articulate prattle, a child as beautiful as ever clung round a mother's neck, or father fondly gazed upon with pride. There, too, conspicuous for stature, tall and large dark eyes, beside her infant stood the mother, but upon her cheeks diffused false tints too well accorded with the glare from playhouse lustres thrown without reserve on every object near. The boy had been the pride and pleasure of all lookers-on in whatsoever place.
Damn, dude, you're
It seemed in
demanding.
this a sort of alien scattered from the clouds. Of lusty vigour, more than infantine he was in limb, in cheek a summer rose just 3 parts blown. A cottage child, if e'er by cottage door on breezy mountain side, or in some sheltering vale, was seen a babe by nature's gifts so favoured. Upon a board decked with refreshments had this child been placed, his little stage in the vast theatre, and there he sat surrounded with a throng of chance spectators, chiefly dissolute men and shameless women, treated and caressed. Ate, drank, and with the fruit and glasses played, while oaths and laughter and indecent speech were rife about him as the songs of birds contending after showers. The mother now is fading out of memory, but I see the lovely boy as I beheld him then among the wretched and the falsely gay, like one of those who walked with hair unsinged amid the fiery furnace. Charms and spells muttered on black and spiteful instigation have stopped, as some believe, the kindliest growths. Ah, with how different spirit might a prayer have been preferred, that this fair creature, checked by special privilege of nature's love, should in his childhood be detained forever. But with its universal freight the tide hath rolled along, and this bright innocent, Mary, may now have lived till he could look with envy on thy nameless babe that sleeps beside the mountain chapel, undisturbed. 4 rapid years had scarcely then been told, since, travelling southward from our pastoral hills, I heard, and for the first time in my life, the voice of woman utter blasphemy. Saw woman as she is, to open shame abandoned, and the pride of public vice. I shuddered, for a barrier seemed at once thrown in, that from humanity divorced humanity, splitting the race of man in twain, yet leaving the same outward form. Distress of mind ensued upon the sight, and ardent meditation. Later years brought to such spectacle a milder sadness. Feelings of pure commiseration, grief for the individual and the overthrow of her soul's beauty. Farther I was then but seldom led, or wished to go. In truth, the sorrow of the passion stopped me there. But let me now, less moved, in order take our arguments. Enough is said to show how causal incidents of real life, observed where pastime only had been sought, outweighed or put to flight the set events and measured passions of the stage, albeit by Siddons trod in the fullness of her power. Yet was the theatre my dear delight, the very gilding, lamps and painted scrolls, and all the mean upholstery of the place wanted not animation, when the tide of pleasure ebbed but to return as fast with the ever-shifting figures of the scene, solemn or gay, whether some beauteous dame advanced in radiance through a deep recess of thick entangled forest, like the moon opening the clouds, or sovereign king announced with flourishing trumpet, came in full-blown state of the world's greatness, winding round with train of courtiers, banners, and a length of guards, or captive led in abject weeds and jingling his slender manacles, or romping girl bounced, leapt, and pawed the air, or mumbling sire, a scarecrow pattern of old age dressed up in all the tatters of infirmity all loosely put together, hobbled in, stumping upon a cane with which he smites from time to time the solid boards, and makes them prate somewhat loudly of the whereabout of one so overloaded with his years. But what of this? The laugh, the grin, grimace, the antics striving to outstrip each other, were all received, the least of them not lost, with an unmeasured welcome. Through the night, between the show and many-headed mass of the spectators, and each several nook filled with its fray or brawl, how eagerly and with what flashes, as it were, the mind turned this way, that way, sportive and alert and watchful as a kitten when at play, while winds are eddying round her, among straws and rustling leaves. Enchanting age and sweet, romantic almost, looked at through a space how small of intervening years. For then, though surely no mean progress had been made in meditations holy and sublime, yet something of a girlish, childlike gloss of novelty survived for scenes like these. Enjoyment haply handed down from times when at a country playhouse some rude barn tricked out for that proud use, if I perchance caught on a summer evening through a chink in the old wall an unexpected glimpse of daylight, the bare thought of where I was gladdened me more than if I had been led into a dazzling cavern of romance, crowded with genii busy among works not to be looked at by the common sun. The matter that detains us now may seem, to many, neither dignified enough nor arduous. It will not be scorned by them who, looking inward, have observed the ties that bind the perishable hours of life each to the other, and the curious props by which the world of memory and thought exists and is sustained. More lofty themes, such as at least do wear a prouder face, solicit our regard, but when I think of these I feel the imaginative power languish within me. Even then it slept, when pressed by tragic sufferings, the heart was more than full. Amid my sobs and tears it slept, even in the pregnant season of youth, although I was most passionately moved and yielded to all changes of the scene with an obsequious promptness. Yet the storm passed not beyond the suburbs of the mind, save when realities of act and mien, the incarnation of the spirits that move in harmony amid the poet's world, rose to ideal grandeur, or, called forth by power of contrast, made me recognize, as at a glance, the things which I had shaped and yet not shaped, had seen and scarcely seen, when having closed the mighty Shakespeare's page, I mused and thought and felt in solitude. Pass we from entertainments that are such professedly, to others titled higher, yet in the estimate of youth at least more near akin to those than names imply. I mean the brawls of lawyers in their courts before the ermined judge, or that great stage where senators, tongue-favoured men, perform admired and envied. Oh, the beating heart when one among the prime of these rose up, one of whose name from childhood we had heard familiarly, a household term, like those the Bedfords, Gloucesters, Salisburys of old, whom the fifth Harry talks of. Silence! Hush! This is no trifler, no short-flighted wit, no stammerer of a minute, painfully delivered. No, the orator hath yoked the hours like young Aurora to his car. Thrice welcome presence. How can patience e'er grow weary of attending on a track that kindles with such glory? All are charmed, astonished. Like a hero in romance, he winds away his never-ending horn. Words follow words, sense seems to follow sense. What memory and what logic, till the strain transcendent, superhuman as it seemed, grows tedious even in a young man's ear. Genius of Burke, forgive the pen seduced by specious wonders, and too slow to tell of what the ingenuous, what bewildered men, beginning to mistrust their boastful guides, and wise men willing to grow wiser, caught rapt auditors from thy most eloquent tongue. Now mute, forever mute in the cold grave, I see him, old but vigorous in age, stand like an oak whose staghorn branches start out of its leafy brow, the more to awe the younger brethren of the grove. But some, while he forewarns, denounces, launches forth against all systems built on abstract rights, keen ridicule. The majesty proclaims of institutes and laws, hallowed by time, declares the vital power of social ties endeared by custom. And by disdain, exploding upstart theory insists upon the allegiance to which men are born. Some, say at once a froward multitude, murmur, for truth is hated where not loved, as the winds fret within the Aeolian cave, galled by their monarch's chain. The times were big with ominous change, which night by night provoked keen struggles, and black clouds of passion raised. But memorable moments intervened, when wisdom, like the goddess from Jove's brain, broke forth in armour of resplendent words, startling the synod. Could a youth, as one in ancient story versed, whose breast had heaved under the weight of classic eloquence, sit, see, and hear, unthankful, uninspired? Nor did the pulpit's oratory fail to achieve its higher triumph. Not unfelt were its admonishments, nor lightly heard the awful truths delivered thence by tongues endowed with various power to search the soul. Yet ostentation domineering oft poured forth harangues, how sadly out of place! There have I seen a comely bachelor, fresh from a toilette of 2 hours, ascend his rostrum, with seraphic glance look up, and in a tone elaborately low, beginning, lead his voice through many a maze a minuet course, and winding up his mouth from time to time into an orifice most delicate, a lurking eyelet, small and only not invisible, again open it out, diffusing thence a smile of rapt irradiation, exquisite. Meanwhile the evangelists, Isaiah, Job, Moses, and he who penned the other day, the death of Abel, Shakespeare, and the bard whose genius spangled o'er a gloomy theme with fancies thick as his inspiring stars, and Ossian, doubt not it is the naked truth, summoned from streaming Morven, each and all would in their turns lend ornaments and flowers to entwine the crook of eloquence that helped this pretty shepherd, pride of all the plains, to rule and guide his captivated flock. I glance but at a few conspicuous marks, leaving 1,000 others, that in hall, court, theatre, conventicle or shop, in public room or private, park or street, each fondly reared on his own pedestal looked out for admiration. Folly, vice, extravagance in gesture, mien and dress, and all the strife of singularity lies to the ear, and lies to every sense. Of these and of the living shapes they wear, there is no end. Such candidates for regard, although well pleased to be where they were found, I did not hunt after, nor greatly prize, nor made unto myself a secret boast of reading them with quick and curious eye. But as a common produce, things that are today, tomorrow will be, took of them such willing note as on some errand bound that asks not speed, the traveller might bestow on seashells that bestrew the sandy beach, or daisies swarming through the fields of June. But foolishness and madness in parade, though most at home in this their dear domain, are scattered everywhere, no rarities, even to the rudest novice of the schools. Me, rather, it employed to note and keep in memory those individual sights of courage or integrity or truth or tenderness which there, set off by foil, appeared more touching. One will I select, a father, for he bore that sacred name. Him saw I, sitting in an open square upon a cornerstone of that low wall, wherein were fixed the iron pales that fenced a spacious grass plot. There in silence sat this one man, with a sickly babe outstretched upon his knee, whom he had thither brought for sunshine and to breathe the fresher air. Of those who passed, and he who looked at him, took no heed, but in his brawny arms the artificer was to the elbow bare, and from his work this moment had been stolen. He held the child, and bending over it, as if he were afraid both of the sun and of the air, which he had come to seek, eyed the poor babe with love unutterable. As the black storm upon the mountain top sets off the sunbeam in the valley, so that huge fermenting mass of humankind serves as a solemn background or relief to single forms and objects, whence they draw for feeling and contemplative regard more than inherent liveliness and power. How oft amid those overflowing streets have I gone forward with the crowd and said unto myself, the face of every one that passes by me is a mystery. Thus have I looked, or ceased to look, oppressed by thoughts of what and whither, when and how, until the shapes before my eyes became a second sight procession, such as glides over still mountains or appears in dreams. And once, far travelled in such mood, beyond the reach of common indication, lost amid the moving pageant, I was smitten abruptly with the view, a sight not rare, of a blind beggar, who with upright face stood, propped against a wall, upon his chest wearing a written paper to explain his story, whence he came and who he was. By the spectacle my mind turned round as with the might of waters. An apt type this label seemed of the utmost we can know, both of ourselves and of the universe. And on the shape of that unmoving man, his steadfast face and sightless eyes, I gazed, as if admonished from another world. Though reared upon the base of outward things, structures like these the excited spirit mainly builds for herself. Scenes different there are, full-formed, that take, with small internal help, possession of the faculties, the peace that comes with night, the deep solemnity of nature's intermediate hours of rest, when the great tide of human life stands still, the business of the day to come unborn, of that gone by, locked up as in the grave. The blended calmness of the heavens and earth, moonlight and stars, and empty streets, and sounds unfrequent as in deserts. At late hours of winter evenings, when unwholesome rains are falling hard, with people yet astir, the feeble salutation from the voice of some unhappy woman, now and then heard as we pass, when no one looks about, nothing is listened to. These, I fear, are falsely catalogued. Things that are not, as the mind answers to them, or the heart is prompt or slow to feel. What say you then to times when half the city shall break out full of one passion, vengeance, rage or fear? To executions, to a street on fire, mobs, riots or rejoicings? From these sights take one, that ancient festival, the fair, holden where martyrs suffered in past time, and named of St. Bartholomew. There see a work completed to our hands, that lays, if any spectacle on earth can do, the whole creative powers of man asleep. For once the Muse's help will we implore, and she shall lodge us, wafted on her wings, above the press and danger of the crowd, upon some showman's platform. What a shock for eyes and ears! What anarchy and din, barbarian and infernal! A phantasma, monstrous in colour, motion, shape, sight, sound. Below, the open space, through every nook of the wide area, twinkles, is alive with heads. The midway region and above is thronged with staring pictures and huge scrolls, dumb proclamations of the prodigies, with chattering monkeys dangling from their poles, and children whirling in their roundabouts. With those that stretch the neck and strain the eyes and crack the voice in rivalship, the crowd inviting, with buffoons against buffoons, grimacing, writhing, screaming, him who grinds the hurdy-gurdy, at the fiddle weaves, rattles the salt-box, thumps the kettle-drum, and him who at the trumpet puffs his cheeks, the silver-collared negro with his timbrel, equestrians, tumblers, women, girls and boys, blue-breeched, pink-vested, with high-towering plumes. All movables of wonder, from all parts I hear, albinos, painted Indians, dwarfs, the horse of knowledge, and the learned pig, the stone-eater, the man that swallows fire, giants, ventriloquists, the invisible girl, the bust that speaks and moves its goggling eyes, the waxwork, clockwork, all the marvellous craft of modern Merlins, wild beasts, puppet shows, all out of the way, far-fetched, perverted things, all freaks of nature, all Promethean thoughts of man, his dullness, madness, and their feats all jumbled up together to compose a parliament of monsters. Tents and booths, meanwhile, as if the whole were one vast mill, are vomiting, receiving on all sides men, women, 3 years' children, babes in arms. Oh, blank confusion, true epitome of what the mighty city is herself, to thousands upon thousands of her sons, living amid the same perpetual whirl of trivial objects, melted and reduced to one identity by differences that have no law, no meaning, and no end. Oppression under which even highest minds must labour, whence the strongest are not free. Though the picture weary out the eye, by nature an unmanageable sight, it is not wholly so to him who looks in steadiness, who hath among least things an undersense of greatest, sees the parts as parts, but with a feeling of the whole. This of all acquisitions first awaits on sundry and most widely different modes of education, nor with least delight on that through which I passed. Attention springs and comprehensiveness and memory flow from early converse with the works of God among all regions, chiefly where appear most obviously simplicity and power. Think how the everlasting streams and woods, stretched and still stretching far and wide, exalt the roving Indian on his desert sands. What grandeur not unfelt, what pregnant show of beauty meets the sunburnt Arab's eye. And as the sea propels from zone to zone its currents, magnifies its shoals of life beyond all compass, spreads and sends aloft armies of clouds, even so its powers and aspects shape for mankind, by principles as fixed, the views and aspirations of the soul to majesty. Like virtue have the forms perennial of the ancient hills, nor less the changeful language of their countenances quickens the slumbering mind, and aids the thoughts, however multitudinous, to move with order and relation. This, if still, as hitherto, in freedom I may speak, not violating any just restraint, as may be hoped, of real modesty. This did I feel in London's vast domain. The spirit of nature was upon me there. The soul of beauty and enduring life vouchsafed her inspiration,
New friend,
and diffused through meagre lines and colours, and the press of self-destroying transitory things, composure and ennobling harmony.
Yes, ma'am.
End of section 7. Section 8 of the Prelude by William Wordsworth. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Book 8th. Retrospect. Love of nature leading to love of man. What sounds are those, Helvellyn, that are heard up to thy summit, through the depth of air ascending, as if distance had the power to make the sounds more audible? What crowd covers or sprinkles o'er yon village green? Crowd seems its solitary hill, to thee, though but a little family of men, shepherds and tillers of the ground, betimes assembled with their children and their wives, and here and there a stranger interspersed. They hold a rustic fair, a festival, such as on this side now and now on that, repeated through his tributary vales, Helvellyn in the silence of his rest sees annually, if clouds towards either ocean blown from their favourite resting place, or mists dissolved, have left him an unshrouded head. Delightful day it is for all who dwell in this secluded glen, and eagerly they give it welcome. Long ere heat of noon, from byre or field the kine were brought, the sheep are penned in cotes, the chaffering is begun. The heifer lows, uneasy at the voice of a new master, bleats the flocks aloud. Booths are there none, a stall or two is here, a lame man or a blind, the one to beg, the other to make music. Hither, too, from far, with baskets slung upon her arm of hawkers' wares, books, pictures, stones, and pins, some aged woman finds her way again, year after year, a punctual visitant. There also stands a speech-maker by rote, pulling the strings of his boxed raree show, and in the lapse of many years may come prouder itinerant, mountebank, or he whose wonders in a covered wain lie hid. But one there is, the loveliest of them all, some sweet lass of the valley, looking out for gains, and who that sees her would not buy? Fruits of her father's orchard are her wares, and with the ruddy produce she walks round among the crowd, half pleased with, half ashamed of her new office, blushing restlessly. The children now are rich, for the old today are generous as the young, and if content with looking on, some ancient wedded pair sit in the shade together while they gaze. A cheerful smile unbends the wrinkled brow. The days departed start again to life, and all the scenes of childhood reappear, faint but more tranquil, like the changing sun to him who slept at noon and wakes at eve. Thus gaiety and cheerfulness prevail, spreading from young to old, from old to young, and no one seems to want his share. Immense is the recess, the circumambient world, magnificent, by which they are embraced. They move about upon the soft green turf. How little they and their doings, seem, and all that they can further or obstruct. Through utter weakness, pitiably dear, as tender infants are, and yet how great, for all things serve them the morning light loves as it glistens on the silent rocks, and them the silent rocks which now from high look down upon them, the reposing clouds, the wild brooks prattling from invisible haunts, and old Helvellyn, conscious of the stir which animates this day their calm abode. With deep devotion, nature, did I feel in that enormous city's turbulent world of men and things, what benefit I owed to thee, and those domains of rural peace, where to the sense of beauty first my heart was opened, tract more exquisitely fair than that famed paradise of 1,000 trees. For Jehol's matchless gardens, for delight of the Tartarian dynasty composed, beyond that mighty wall not fabulous, China's stupendous mound, by patient toil of myriads and boon nature's lavish help, there in a clime from widest empire chosen, fulfilling, could enchantment have done more, a sumptuous dream of flowery lawns, with domes of pleasure sprinkled over, shady dells for eastern monasteries, sunny mounts with temples crested, bridges, gondolas, rocks, dens and groves of foliage taught to melt into each other their obsequious hues, vanished and vanishing in subtle chase, too fine to be pursued, or standing forth in no discordant opposition, strong and gorgeous as the colours side by side bedded among rich plumes of tropic birds, and mountains over all embracing all, and all the landscape endlessly enriched with waters running, falling, or asleep. But lovelier far than this, the paradise where I was reared, in nature's primitive gifts favoured no less, and more to every sense delicious, seeing that the sun and sky, the elements and seasons as they change, do find a worthy fellow labourer there. Man free, man working for himself, with choice of time and place and object, by his wants, his comforts, native occupations, cares, cheerfully led to individual ends, or social, and still followed by a train unwooed, unthought of even, simplicity and beauty and inevitable grace. Yea, when a glimpse of those imperial bowers would to a child be transport overgreat, when but a half-hour's roam through such a place would leave behind a dance of images that shall break in upon his sleep for weeks, even then the common haunts of the green earth and ordinary interests of man, which they embosom, all without regard as both may seem, are fastening on the heart insensibly, each with the other's help. For me, when my affections first were led from kindred, friends, and playmates to partake love for the human creature's absolute self, that noticeable kindliness of heart sprang out of fountains, there abounding most where sovereign nature dictated the tasks and occupations which her beauty adorned, and shepherds were the men that pleased me first, not such as Saturn ruled mid Latian wilds, with arts and laws so tempered that their lives left, even to us toiling in this late day, a bright tradition of the golden age, not such as, mid Arcadian fastnesses, sequestered, handed down among themselves felicity and Grecian song renowned, nor such as, when an adverse fate had driven from house and home the courtly band whose fortunes entered, with Shakespeare's genius, the wild woods of Arden, amid sunshine or in shade, culled the best fruits of time's uncounted hours, ere Phoebe sighed for the false Ganymede, or there where Perdita and Florizel together danced, queen of the feast and king, nor such as Spenser fabled. True it is that I had heard what he perhaps had seen of maids at sunrise bringing in from far their May-bush, and along the streets in flocks parading with a song of taunting rhymes aimed at the laggards slumbering within doors. Had also heard, from those who yet remembered, tales of the Maypole dance, and wreaths that decked porch, doorway, or kirk pillar, and of youths, each with his maid, before the sun was up, by annual custom, issuing forth in troops to drink the waters of some sainted well, and hang it round with garlands. Love survives, but for such purpose flowers no longer grow. The times, too sage, perhaps too proud, have dropped these lighter graces, and the rural ways and manners which my childhood looked upon were the unluxuriant produce of a life intent on little but substantial needs, yet rich in beauty, beauty that was felt. But images of danger and distress, man suffering among awful powers and forms, of this I heard and saw enough to make imagination restless. Nor was free myself from frequent perils, nor were tales wanting, the tragedies of former times, hazards and strange escapes, of which the rocks immutable and overflowing streams, where'er I roamed, were speaking monuments. Smooth life had flock and shepherd in old time, long springs and tepid winters on the banks of delicate Galesus, and no less those scattered along Adria's myrtle shores. Smooth life had herdsman, and his snow-white herd to triumphs and to sacrificial rites devoted on the inviolable stream of rich Clitumnus. And the goat-herd lived as calmly underneath the pleasant brows of cool Lucretilis, where the pipe was heard of Pan, invisible god, thrilling the rocks with tutelary music, from all harm the fold protecting. I myself, mature in manhood then, have seen a pastoral tract like one of these, where fancy might run wild, though under skies less generous, less serene. There, for her own delight, had nature framed a pleasure ground, fused a fair expanse of level pasture, islanded with groves and banked with woody risings, with the plain endless, here opening widely out, and there shut up in lesser lakes or beds of lawn and intricate recesses, creek or bay sheltered within a shelter, where at large the shepherd strays, a rolling hut his home. Thither he comes with springtime, there abides all summer, and at sunrise ye may hear his flageolet to liquid notes of love attuned, or sprightly fife resounding far. Look is there none, nor tract of that vast space where passage opens, but the same shall have in turn its visitant, telling there his hours in unlaborious pleasure, with no task more toilsome than to carve a beechen bowl for spring or fountain, which the traveller finds when through the region he pursues at will his devious course. A glimpse of such sweet life I saw when, from the melancholy walls of Goslar, once imperial, I renewed my daily walk along that wide champaign, that reaching to her gates spreads east and west, and northwards, from beneath the mountainous verge of the Hercynian forest. Yet, hail to you, moors, mountains, headlands, and ye hollow vales, ye long deep channels for the Atlantic's voice, powers of my native region, ye that seize the heart with firmer grasp, your snows and streams ungovernable, and your terrifying winds that howl so dismally for him who treads companionless your awful solitudes. There 'tis the shepherd's task the winter long to wait upon the storms, of their approach sagacious, into sheltering coves he drives his flock, and thither from the homestead bears a toilsome burden up the craggy ways, and deals it out, their regular nourishment strewn on the frozen snow. And when the spring looks out, and all the pastures dance with lambs, and when the flock with warmer weather climbs higher and higher, him his office leads to watch their goings, whatsoever track the wanderers choose. For this he quits his home at dayspring, and no sooner doth the sun begin to strike him with a fire-like heat, than he lies down upon some shining rock, and breakfasts with his dog. When they have stolen, as is their wont, a pittance from strict time, for rest not needed or exchange of love, then from his couch he starts, and now his feet crush out a livelier fragrance from the flowers of lowly time, by nature's skill enwrought in the wild turf. The lingering dews of morn smoke round him, as from hill to hill he hies, his staff protending like a hunter's spear, or by its aid leaping from crag to crag, and o'er the brawling beds of unbridged streams. Philosophy, methinks, at fancy's call might deign to follow him through what he does, or sees in his day's march. Himself he feels, in those vast regions where his service lies, a free man, wedded to his life of hope and hazard, and hard labour interchanged with that majestic indolence so dear to native man. A rambling schoolboy, thus I felt his presence in his own domain, as of a lord and master, or a power, or genius, under nature, under God, presiding, and severest solitude had more commanding looks when he was there. When up the lonely brooks on rainy days angling I went, or trod the trackless hills by mists bewildered, suddenly mine eyes have glanced upon him distant a few steps, in size a giant, stalking through thick fog, his sheep like Greenland bears, or as he stepped beyond the boundary line of some hill shadow, his form hath flashed upon me, glorified by the deep radiance of the setting sun. Or him have I descried in distant sky, a solitary object and sublime, above all height, like an aerial cross stationed alone upon a spiry rock of the Chartreuse for worship. Thus was man ennobled outwardly before my sight, and thus my heart was early introduced to an unconscious love and reverence of human nature. Hence the human form to me became an index of delight, of grace and honour, power and worthiness. Meanwhile this creature, spiritual almost as those of books, but more exalted far more of an imaginative form than the gay Corin of the groves, who lives for his own fancies, or to dance by the hour in coronal, with Phyllis in the midst, was, for the purposes of kind, a man with the most common, husband, father, learned, could teach, admonish, suffered with the rest from vice and folly, wretchedness and fear. Of this I little saw, cared less for it, but something must have felt. Call ye these appearances which I beheld of shepherds in my youth, this sanctity of nature given to man, a shadow, a delusion? Ye who pore on the dead letter miss the spirit of things, whose truth is not a motion or a shape instinct with vital functions, but a block or waxen image which yourselves have made, and ye adore. But blessed be the God of nature and of man that this was so, that men before my inexperienced eyes did first present themselves thus purified, removed, and to a distance that was swift. And so we all of us in some degree are led to knowledge, wheresoever led, and howsoever, were it otherwise, and we found evil fast as we find good in our first years, or think that it is found, how could the innocent heart bear up and live? But doubly fortunate my lot, not here alone, but something of a better life perhaps was round me than it is the privilege of most to move in, but that first I looked at man through objects that were great or fair, first communed with him by their help, and thus was founded a sure safeguard and defence against the weight of meanness, selfish cares, coarse manners, vulgar passions that beat in on all sides from the ordinary world in which we traffic. Starting from this point, I had my face turned toward the truth, began with an advantage furnished by that kind of prepossession, without which the soul receives no knowledge that can bring forth good, no genuine insight ever comes to her. From the restraint of over-watchful eyes preserved, I moved about, year after year, happy and now most thankful that my walk was guarded from too early intercourse with the deformities of crowded life, and those ensuing laughters and contempts, self-pleasing, which, if we would wish to think with a due reverence on earth's rightful Lord, here placed to be the inheritor of heaven, will not permit us, but pursue the mind that to devotion willingly would rise into the temple and the temple's heart. Yet deem not, friend, that humankind with me thus early took a place preeminent. Nature herself was at this unripe time but secondary to my own pursuits and animal activities and all their trivial pleasures, and when these had drooped and gradually expired, and nature, prized for her own sake, became my joy, even then, and upwards through late youth, until not less than 22 summers had been told, was man in my affections and regards subordinate to her visible forms and viewless agencies. Passion, she, a rapture often, and immediate love, ever at hand. He only a delight occasional, an accidental grace, his hour being not yet come. Far less had then the inferior creature, beast or bird, attuned my spirit to that gentleness of love, though they had long been carefully observed. Won from me those minute obeisances of tenderness, which I may number now with my first blessing. Nevertheless, on these the light of beauty did not fall in vain, or grandeur circumfuse them to no end. But when that first poetic faculty of plain imagination and severe, no longer a mute influence of the soul, ventured, at some rash muse's earnest call, to try her strength among harmonious words, and to book notions and the rules of art did knowingly conform itself, there came among the simple shapes of human life a wilfulness of fancy and conceit, and nature and her objects beautified these fictions, as in some sort, in their turn, they burnished her. From touch of this new power nothing was safe. The elder tree that grew beside the well-known charnel house had then a dismal look. The yew tree had its ghost, that took his station there for ornament. The dignities of plain occurrence then were tasteless, and truth's golden mean, a point where no sufficient pleasure could be found. Then, if a widow, staggering with the blow of her distress, was known to have turned her steps to the cold grave in which her husband slept, one night, or haply more than one, through pain or half insensate impotence of mind, the fact was caught at greedily, and there she must be visitant the whole year through, wetting the turf with never-ending tears. Through quaint obliquities I might pursue these cravings, when the foxglove, one by one, upwards through every stage of the tall stem, had shed beside the public way its bells, and stood of all dismantled, save the last, left at the tapering ladder's top, that seemed to bend as doth a slender blade of grass tipped with a raindrop. Fancy loved to seat beneath the plant despoiled, but crested still with this last relic, soon itself to fall. Some vagrant mother, whose arch little ones, all unconcerned by her dejected plight, laughed as with rival eagerness their hands gathered the purple cups that round them lay, strewing the turf's green slope. A diamond light, whene'er the summer sun declining smote a smooth rock wet with constant springs, was seen sparkling from out a copse-clad bank that rose fronting our cottage. Oft beside the hearth seated, with open door, often and long upon this restless lustre have I gazed, that made my fancy restless as itself. It was now for me a burnished silver shield suspended over a knight's tomb, who lay inglorious, buried in the dusky wood. An entrance now into some magic cave or palace built by fairies of the rock. Nor could I have been bribed to disenchant the spectacle by visiting the spot. That wilful fancy, in no hurtful mood, engrafted far-fetched shapes on feelings bred by pure imagination. Busy power she was, and with her ready pupil turned instinctively to human passions, then least understood. Yet mid the fervent swarm of these vagaries, with an eye so rich as mine was through the bounty of a grand and lovely region, I had forms distinct to steady me. Each airy thought revolved round a substantial centre, which at once incited it to motion, and controlled. I did not pine like one in cities bred, as was thy melancholy lot, dear friend. Great spirit as thou art, in endless streams of sickliness, disjoining, joining, things without the light of knowledge. Where the harm, if when the woodman languished with disease induced by sleeping nightly on the ground within his sod-built cabin, Indian-wise, I called the pangs of disappointed love, and all the sad etc. of the wrong, to help him to his grave. Meanwhile the man, if not already from the woods retired to die at home, was haply, as I knew, withering by slow degrees mid gentle airs, birds, running streams, and hills so beautiful on golden evenings, while the charcoal pile breathed up its smoke, an image of his ghost or spirit that full soon must take her flight. Nor shall we not be tending towards that point of sound humanity to which our tale leads, though by sinuous ways, if here I show how fancy, in a season when she wove those slender cords to guide the unconscious boy for the man's sake, could feed at nature's call some pensive musings which might well beseem maturer years. A grove there is whose boughs stretch from the western marge of Thurston Mere, with length of shade so thick that whoso glides along the line of low-roofed water moves as in a cloister. Once, while in that shade loitering, I watched the golden beams of light flung from the setting sun, as they reposed in silent beauty on the naked ridge of a high eastern hill. Thus flowed my thoughts in a pure stream of words fresh from the heart. Dear native regions, wheresoe'er shall close my mortal course, there will I think on you. Dying will cast on you a backward look, even as this setting sun, albeit the veil is nowhere touched by one memorial gleam, doth with the fond remains of his last power still linger, and a farewell lustre sheds on the dear mountain tops where first he rose. Enough of humble arguments. Recall my song, those high emotions which thy voice has heretofore made known, that bursting forth of sympathy, inspiring and inspired, when everywhere a vital pulse was felt, and all the several frames of things, like stars through every magnitude distinguishable, shone mutually indebted, or half lost, each in the other's blaze, a galaxy of life and glory. In the midst stood man, outwardly, inwardly contemplated, as of all visible nature's crown, though born of dust and kindred to the worm, a being, both in perception and discernment, first in every capability of rapture, through the divine effect of power and love, as more than anything we know instinct with Godhead, and by reason and by will acknowledging dependency sublime. Ere long, the lonely mountains left, I moved, begirt from day to day with temporal shapes of vice and folly thrust upon my view, objects of sport and ridicule and scorn, manners and characters discriminate, and little bustling passions that eclipse, as well they might, the impersonated thought, the idea or abstraction of the kind. An idler among academic bowers, such was my new condition, as at large has been set forth, yet here the vulgar light of present, actual, superficial life, gleaming through colouring of other times, old usages and local privilege, was welcome, softened, if not solemnized. This notwithstanding, being brought more near to vice and guilt, forerunning wretchedness, I trembled, thought at times of human life with an indefinite terror and dismay, such as the storms and angry elements had bred in me. But gloomier far, a dim analogy to uproar and misrule, disquiet, danger, and obscurity. It might be told, but wherefore speak of things common to all, that seeing I was led gravely to ponder, judging between good and evil, not as for the mind's delight, but for her guidance, one who was to act, as sometimes to the best of feeble means I did, by human sympathy impel, and, through dislike and most offensive pain, was to the truth conducted, of this faith, never forsaken, that by acting well and understanding I should learn to love the end of life and everything we know. Grave teacher, stern preceptress, for at times thou canst put on an aspect most severe. London, to thee I willingly return, erewhile my verse played idly with the flowers and wrought upon thy mantle, satisfied with that amusement, and a simple look of childlike inquisition now and then cast upwards on thy countenance, to detect some inner meanings which might harbour there. But how could I in mood so light indulge, keeping such fresh remembrance of the day, when having thridded the long labyrinth of the suburban villages, I first entered thy vast dominion. On the roof of an itinerant vehicle I sat, with vulgar men about me, trivial forms of houses, pavement, streets, of men and things, mean shapes on every side. But at the instant when to myself it fairly might be said, the threshold now is overpassed. How strange that aught external to the living mind should have such mighty sway, yet so it was. The weight of ages did at once descend upon my heart. No thought embodied, no distinct remembrances, but weight and power, power growing under weight. Alas, I feel that I am trifling. 'Twas a moment's pause. All that took place within me came and went as in a moment, yet with time it dwells, and grateful memory as a thing divine. The curious traveller who from open day hath passed with torches into some huge cave, the grotto of Antiparos, or the den in old time haunted by that Danish witch, Jordas. He looks around and sees the vault widening on all sides, sees, or thinks he sees, ere long the massy roof above his head, that instantly unsettles and recedes. Substance and shadow, light and darkness, all commingled, making up a canopy of shapes and forms and tendencies to shape that shift and vanish, change and interchange like spectres, ferment silent and sublime, that after a short space works less and less, till every effort, every motion gone, the scene before him stands in perfect view, exposed and lifeless as a written book. But let him pause a while and look again, and a new quickening shall succeed, at first beginning timidly, then creeping fast, till the whole cave, so late senseless mass, busies the eye with images and forms boldly assembled. Here is shadowed forth from the projections, wrinkles, cavities, variegated landscape. There the shape of some gigantic warrior clad in mail, the ghostly semblance of a hooded monk, veiled nun or pilgrim resting on his staff. Strange congregation, yet not slow to meet eyes that perceive through minds that can inspire.
I can beat you.
Even in such sort had I at first been moved, nor otherwise continued to be moved, as I explored the vast metropolis, fount of my country's destiny and the world's, that great emporium, chronicle at once and burial place of passions, and their home imperial, their chief living residence.
This plain's beauty
With
is
strong
inspiring.
sensations teeming as it did of past and present, such a place must needs have pleased me, seeking knowledge at that time far less than craving power. Yet knowledge came, sought or unsought, and influxes of power came, of themselves, or at her call derived in fits of kindliest apprehensiveness from all sides, when whate'er was in itself capacious found, or seemed to find, in me a correspondent amplitude of mind. Such is the strength and glory of our youth. The human nature unto which I felt that I belonged and reverenced with love was not a punctual presence, but a spirit diffused through time and space, with aid derived of evidence from monuments, erect, prostrate, or leaning towards their common rest in earth, the widely scattered wreck sublime of vanished nations, or more clearly drawn from books and what they picture and record. 'Tis true, the history of our native land with those of Greece compared and popular Rome, and in our high-wrought modern narratives stripped of their harmonizing soul, the life of manners and familiar incidents had never much delighted me, and less than other intellects had mine been used to lean upon extrinsic circumstance of record or tradition. But a sense of what in the great city had been done and suffered, and was doing, suffering, still, weighed with me, could support the test of thought. And, in despite of all that had gone by, or was departing never to return, there I conversed with majesty and power like independent natures. Hence the place was thronged with impregnations like the wilds in which my early feelings had been nursed. Bare hills and valleys, full of caverns, rocks, and audible seclusions, dashing lakes, echoes and waterfalls, and pointed crags that into music touched the passing wind. Here then my young imagination found no uncongenial element, could here among new objects serve or give command, even as the heart's occasions might require, to forward reason's else too scrupulous march. The effect was still more elevated views of human nature, neither vice nor guilt, debasement undergone by body or mind, nor all the misery forced upon my sight, misery not lightly passed, but sometimes scanned most feelingly, could overthrow my trust in what we may become, induce belief that I was ignorant, had been falsely taught, a solitary who with vain conceits had been inspired, and walked about in dreams. From those sad scenes when meditation turned, lo, everything that was indeed divine retained its purity inviolate, nay, brighter shone, by this portentous gloom set off, Such opposition has aroused the mind of Adam, yet in paradise, though fallen from bliss. When in the east he saw darkness ere day's mid-course, and morning light more orient in the western cloud, that drew o'er the blue firmament a radiant white, descending slow with something heavenly fraught. Add also that among the multitudes of that huge city oftentimes was seen effectingly set forth, more than elsewhere is possible, the unity of man, one spirit over ignorance and vice predominant in good and evil hearts, one sense for moral judgments as one eye for the sun's light. The soul, when smitten thus by a sublime idea, whencesoe'er vouchsafed for union or communion, feeds on the pure bliss and takes her rest with God. Thus from a very early age, O friend, my thoughts by slow gradations had been drawn to humankind, and to the good and ill of human life. Nature had led me on, and oft amid the busy hum I seemed to travel independent of her help, as if I had forgotten her. But no, the world of humankind outweighed not hers in my habitual thoughts. The scale of love, though filling daily, still was light, compared with that in which her mighty objects lay. End of section 8. Section 9 of the Prelude by William Wordsworth. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Book 9th. Residence in France. Even as a river, partly it might seem, yielding to old remembrances and swayed in part by fear to shape a way direct that would engulf him soon in the ravenous sea, turns and will measure back his course, far back, seeking the very regions which he crossed in his first outset. So have we, my friend, turned and returned with intricate delay. Or as a traveller who has gained the brow of some aerial down, while there he halts for breathing time, is tempted to review the region left behind him. And if aught deserving notice have escaped regard, or been regarded with too careless eye, strives from that height with one and yet one more last look to make the best amends he may. So have we lingered. Now we start afresh with courage, and new hope risen on our toil, fair greetings to this shapeless eagerness, whene'er it comes, needful in work so long, thrice needful to the argument which now awaits us. Oh, how much unlike the past! Free as a colt at pasture on the hill, I ranged at large through London's wide domain, month after month. Obscurely did I live, not seeking frequent intercourse with men, by literature or elegance or rank distinguished. Scarcely was a year thus spent ere I forsook the crowded solitude, with less regret for its luxurious pomp and all the nicely guarded shows of art, than for the humble bookstalls in the streets, exposed to eye and hand where'er I turned. France lured me forth, the realm that I had crossed so lately, journeying toward the snow-clad Alps. But now, relinquishing the scrip and staff, and all enjoyment which the summer sun sheds round the steps of those who meet the day with motion constant as his own, I went, prepared to sojourn in a pleasant town, washed by the current of the stately Loire. Through Paris lay my readiest course, and there, sojourning a few days, I visited in haste each spot of old or recent fame, the latter chiefly, from the field of Mars down to the suburbs of St. Anthony, and from Montmartre southward to the dome of Geneviève. In both her clamorous halls, the National Synod and the Jacobins, I saw the revolutionary power toss like a ship at anchor, rocked by storms. The arcades I traversed, in the palace huge of Orléans, coasted round and round the line of tavern, brothel, gaming house and shop, great rendezvous of worst and best, the walk of all who had a purpose, or had not. I stared and listened with a stranger's ears to hawkers and haranguers, hubbub wild, and hissing factionists with ardent eyes, in knots or pairs or single. Not a look hope takes, or doubt or fear is forced to wear, but seemed there present, and I scanned them all, watched every gesture uncontrollable, of anger and vexation and despite, all side by side, and struggling face to face with gaiety and dissolute idleness. Where silent zephyrs sported with the dust of the Bastille, I sat in the open sun, and from the rubbish gathered up a stone, and pocketed the relic in the guise of an enthusiast. Yet in honest truth I looked for something that I could not find, affecting more emotion than I felt. For 'tis most certain that these various sights, however potent their first shock, with me appeared to recompense the traveller's pains less than the painted Magdalene of Lebrun, a beauty exquisitely wrought, with hair dishevelled, gleaming eyes, and rueful cheek pale and bedropped with ever-flowing tears. But hence to my more permanent abode I hasten, There by novelties in speech, domestic manners, customs, gestures, looks, and all the attire of ordinary life, attention was engrossed. And thus amused I stood mid those concussions, unconcerned, tranquil almost, and careless as a flower glassed in a greenhouse, or a parlour shrub that
I'm in
spreads
the
its
future. I'm
leaves
just
in
hanging out,
unmolested
dude. I'm
peace,
listening.
while every bush and tree the country through is shaking to the roots. Indifference this which may seem strange, but I was unprepared with needful knowledge, that abruptly passed into a theatre whose stage was filled and busy with an action far advanced. Like others I had skimmed and sometimes read with care the master pamphlets of the day, nor wanted such half insight as grew wild upon that meagre soil, helped out by talk and public news. But having never seen a chronicle that might suffice to show whence the main organs of the public power had sprung, their transmigrations, when and how accomplished, giving thus unto events a form and body, all things were to me loose and disjointed, and the affections left without a vital interest. At that time, moreover, the first storm was overblown, and the strong hand of outward violence locked up in quiet. For myself, I fear now in connection with so great a theme, to speak, as I must be compelled to do, of one so unimportant. Night by night did I frequent the formal haunts of men, whom in the city privilege of birth sequestered from the rest, societies polished in arts and in punctilio verse, whence and from deeper causes all discourse of good and evil of the time was shunned with scrupulous care. But these restrictions soon proved tedious, and I gradually withdrew into a noisier world, and thus ere long became a patriot. But my heart was all given to the people, and my love was theirs. A band of military officers then stationed in the city were the chief of my associates. Some of these wore swords that had been seasoned in the wars, and all were men well born, the chivalry of France. In age and temper differing, they had yet one spirit ruling in each heart, alike, save only one hereafter to be named, were bent upon undoing what was done. This was their rest and only hope. Therewith no fear had they of bad becoming worse, for worst to them was come, nor would have stirred or deemed it worth a moment's thought to stir in any thing, save only as the act looked thitherward. One, reckoning by years, was in the prime of manhood, and erewhile he had sat lord in many tender hearts, though heedless of such honours now, and changed. His temper was quite mastered by the times, and they had blighted him, had eaten away the beauty of his person, doing wrong alike to body and to mind. His port, which once had been erect and open, now was stooping and contracted, and a face, endowed by nature with her fairest gifts of symmetry and light and bloom, expressed, as much as any that was ever seen, a ravage out of season, made by thoughts unhealthy and vexatious. With the hour that from the press of Paris duly brought its freight of public news, the fever came, a punctual visitant to shake this man, disarmed his voice and fanned his yellow cheek into 1,000 colours. While he read or mused, his sword was haunted by his touch continually, like an uneasy place in his own body. 'Twas in truth an hour of universal ferment. Mildest men were agitated, and commotions, strife of passion and opinion, filled the walls of peaceful houses with unquiet sounds. The soil of common life was at that time too hot to tread upon. Oft said I then, and not then only, what a mockery this of history, the past and that to come. Now do I feel how all men are deceived, reading of nations and their works in faith, faith given to vanity and emptiness. Oh, laughter for the page that would reflect to future times the face of what now is. The land all swarmed with passion like a plain devoured by locusts. Cara, Gorsas, add 100 other names, forgotten now, nor to be heard of more, yet they were powers like earthquakes, shocks repeated day by day, and felt through every nook of town and field. Such was the state of things. Meanwhile the chief of my associates stood prepared for flight to augment the band of emigrants in arms upon the borders of the Rhine, and leagued with foreign foes mustered for instant war. This was their undisguised intent, and they were waiting with the whole of their desires the moment to depart. An Englishman born in a land whose very name appeared to license some unruliness of mind, a stranger with youth's further privilege, and the indulgence that a half-learnt speech wins from the courtiers. I, who had been else shunned and not tolerated, freely lived with these defenders of the crown, and talked and heard their notions, nor did they disdain the wish to bring me over to their cause. But though untaught by thinking or by books to reason well of polity or law, and nice distinctions, then on every tongue, of natural rights and civil, and to acts of nations and their passing interests, if with unworldly ends and aims compared, almost indifferent, even the historian's tale prizing but little otherwise than I prized tales of the poets, as it made the heart beat high, and filled the fancy with fair forms, old heroes and their sufferings and their deeds. Yet in the regal sceptre and the pomp of orders and degrees, I nothing found then or had ever, even in crudest youth, that dazzled me, but rather what I mourned and ill could brook, beholding that the best ruled not, and feeling that they ought to rule. For, born in a poor district, and which yet retaineth more of ancient homeliness than any other nook of English ground, it was my fortune scarcely to have seen, through the whole tenor of my school-day time, the face of one who, whether boy or man, was vested with attention or respect through claims of wealth or blood, nor was it least of many benefits in later years derived from academic institutes and rules, that they held something up to view of a republic where all stood thus far upon equal ground, that we were brothers all in honour as in one community, scholars and gentlemen, where furthermore distinction open lay to all that came, and wealth and titles were in less esteem than talents, worth, and prosperous industry. Add unto this subservience from the first to presences of God's mysterious power, made manifest in nature's sovereignty, and fellowship with venerable books, to sanction the proud workings of the soul and mountain liberty. It could not be but that one tutored thus should look with awe upon the faculties of man, receive gladly the highest promises, and hail, as best, the government of equal rights and individual worth. And hence, O friend, if at the first great outbreak I rejoiced less than might well befit my youth, the cause in part lay here, that unto me the events seemed nothing out of nature's certain course, a gift that was come rather late than soon.
Let's stop right there. First of all, they don't even know how that they don't even know how that came about it. Nobody knows. Shot down from space. I don't even know. Yeah, I'm the one inside it, and I don't even know. So I can't get a straight I can't get a straight answer out of anybody either. They kind of beat around the bush a little bit. So I don't know what the school is. I'm just hanging out. You're literally preventing me from living life because like this fanatical group. I cannot stress enough, like, the mentality here is, like, it's sad, truly. The way that it's being done. Hi, you know, which I have done 100 times. Truly, you are, the people alive today, I don't know what to tell you. I don't. By no means do I feel like I have any problems, and it's you. More than capable, you know? I'm not involved with them. We're trying to leave that. I don't know what to tell you there. I'm not hearing you. At all. It's definitely not a school, a legal one anyway. But I mean, here I'm listening. I'm enjoying it.